I'm Meredith Christensen.
And I'm Bonnie Rowland, and this is
Bio-Minute News. Breaking news from Mason Mill Park. Invasive plants have been seen wiping out native species.
Let's go to Laura in the field for more information.
Behind me you can see the invasive plant species Heterohelix, more commonly known as English ivy. This species has taken over large parts of Mason Mills and the United States. At first glance, it appears to harmlessly cover the ground, but when you least expect it, it silently assassinates the native plants using a variety of different methods. Back to you, Bonnie.
Here's some footage of this nefarious plant in action. Seen here, the English ivy is stealing sunlight, the energy source for plants, from this poor native plant. It is able to do so because of its vast coverage with its many leaves. Without sunlight, photosynthesis can't take place and no energy will be produced.
And here, the English ivy is killing its competitors by maliciously hoarding all their nutrients. The ivy takes up important nutrients from the soil that is essential for the survival of the native plants.
English ivy can also suffocate its victims by slowly overtaking it so that it can no longer produce its own leaves.
This all seems terrible, but why should we care, Bonnie?
Well, Meredith, these naughty invasive plants are preventing native plants from growing in their natural habitats. It changes the food web because it destroys the native plants, which decreases biodiversity and can have an extreme effect on the ecosystem.
Biodiversity? Why does that matter?
Well, to answer that question, we have Professor Lent in the studio with us today.
So great to have you, Professor.
It's great to be here.
Now tell us, why does biodiversity matter?
Well, biodiversity is the degree of variation of life forms within a system. This can include not only the number of species, but the ratio of the species to each other. In general, the higher the biodiversity is, the more likely organisms are to survive if their main food sources are depleted.
That makes sense. These plants come in and prevent the other plants from living and therefore decrease the ratio of species to plants, right?
Yes, and the animals that fed on the plants that the invasive species outcompeted no longer have a food source. It upsets the entire structure of the food web and has a disastrous effect on the ecosystem, all from just one plant.
But how do we determine if a plant is invasive?
According to the National Wildlife Federation, an invasive plant is a plant that is not native to the ecosystem and causes harm to the ecosystem it's invading.
Well, okay, but how do these invasive species get here?
You know all those beautiful exotic plants that people love to have in their yards? Some of them are very harmful and invasive. Additionally, invasive species have been used in an effort to decrease natural events like soil erosion. Sometimes these plants do the job they're intended to do, but when they do not, they severely decrease biodiversity.
Would an example be the kudzu that's all over Georgia?
Yes, some people think Poeria lobata, or kudzu, is a native plant to Georgia, but in fact it was originally imported from Japan. It has been used as a forage plant to prevent soil erosion and even to celebrate the 100th birthday of the United States. But the vine is very destructive. It can prevent trees from getting enough sunlight and take vital nutrients from the soil. Ridding this plant from the south has become quite a daunting task. The vine covers millions of acres in the south and can grow up to a foot per day. It has even been proven that some herbicides help the plant grow faster. So if you're looking for a nice vine to grow in your yard, steer clear of kudzu and other invasive plants. Instead, look for plants that are tagged as native to your area. This one is invasive and will harm all of your other plants.
Wow, that's just like the English ivy in Mason Mill. Who knew that invasive species were so diverse and dangerous? Thank you so much for being here today, Professor.
More news from Mason Mill. Back to Laura in the field.
English ivy is a seemingly harmless plant that is taking over Mason Mills Park. The restoration efforts, like physically ripping the plants out of the ground, are helping, but it continues coming back. Countless hours have been spent trying to rid the park of this loathsome plant, but it, like the ice plant in California, is a terrific competitor and continues to survive.